Welcome. So good to be with you on this Wednesday as we get together for a little midweek Bible study and devotional time. So glad you're taking some time out of your day, out of your week to join us to dive into God's word and hopefully be uplifted and encouraged. And as I often say, a little bit challenged by what he has to say to us, or maybe a lot bit challenged sometimes, depending on what it is. Speaking of challenges, it is so much easier, isn't it, to do or to say you're going to do something than to actually do it, right? It's so much harder to actually follow through and do something than it is to just say it, right? And obviously we know that, right? But I have a friend who often says, "Don't just talk about it, be about it." And I know he's not the only one who says that, but I like that line. Don't just talk about it, be about it. Because after all, anybody can make a claim. Anybody can say, whatever. They can say the right things or say what they want to do or what they, hope will happen, but there's a difference between saying the right thing or saying what you want to do and actually living it out and doing it, right? Eventually, no matter what you say, your life is going to show what is true. Either you're going to do that or not, and your life is going to be evidence of what it is that you actually believe and how much you believe that. And that's kind of where John takes us in First John chapter 2. He's not just interested in what we say our relationship with God is like. He's asking us, does our life and our actions actually match our words? In fact, John says this in verse 3. He says, "We know that we have come to know him." In other words, we know that we have this relationship with him and we are connected to him, that we know him, not just know about him, but we know him if we keep his commands. Now, one thing he's not saying that we earn our relationship with God, but what he is saying is that our life is evidence of our relationship with God. Because because of our relationship with him, it begins to shape the way that we think and the way that we speak and the way that we live. And John is very direct about this, right? He says that's if we know him, we've come to keep his commands. On the other side, he says if someone claims to know God but does not keep his commands, does not do what he says to do, then that person is a liar, right? Now that's strong language, and it's meant to be, right? Because John is helping us to see that knowing God is not just something we say, something we claim, and not even something we just believe in our heads. It's something that shows up in our obedience and in the way that we live our lives. We live in response to our knowledge of God and our relationship with him. In fact, John adds this. He said, if anyone obeys God, then love for God is truly made complete in them. In other words, obedience isn't just a duty, it's an expression of our love for God and ultimately his love for us, right? That's poured into our lives, right? And so when we obey God, we're not just following rules, we're responding to him and how he has first loved us and his grace and mercy poured into us to even have a relationship with him, right? And so our obedience is how our love for God is lived out and brought to completion. John even takes it a step further. He says, whoever claims to live in him must walk as Jesus did, right? So it's not just about, our standard, it's about Jesus is the standard, right? That raises the standard to a whole new level. It's not just avoiding wrong, it's about following in the footsteps of Jesus. The life that he lived becomes the model. The way he lived, the way he obeyed the Father, the way he treated people. That's what begins to shape us. It doesn't mean that, right, we're always going to get it right. That's not what John is saying at all. In fact, we know that we won't always get it right. We're going to mess up, but we're moving in that direction, following in the footsteps of Jesus. We're asking ourselves, evaluating ourselves, is my life moving toward looking more like Jesus or not? Right? Not just in what I say, but in actually how I live. And maybe that's the question that we ought to ask ourselves today. Does my walk match my talk? If I'm a Christian, I'm proclaiming to be a follower of Jesus. Does my walk match my talk? When people look at my life, not just listen to my words, but when they look at my life, do they see a life that's shaped by Jesus and looking like Jesus? Because John's message is simple. When we truly know him, it will be seen in the way we live. And so don't just talk the talk, right? Don't talk about it. Don't just talk about it, be about it, right? And walk the walk that we are called to live. Hope you have a blessed day. God bless.